The front door swings open. Bart's little brother steps inside first, still laughing about something from dinner. He doesn't see the man in the shadows by the staircase. He doesn't see the gun. Blam! He drops before he even understands what happened. Behind him, Bart's mother is still standing in the doorway, keys in her hand, frozen for half a second too long. Blam! Outside, Bart's father hears the noise and thinks a car backfiring. Fireworks. He walks toward the sound to find out. Blam! And then Bart steps through the door. The shooter turns the gun on him too. One shot, through the arm, just enough to make it look real. By the time police arrive, this looks like the worst kind of tragedy, a family walking in on a robbery, in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it wasn't random. It wasn't a stranger. And the person who set the whole thing in motion had been trying to make this exact night happen for 3 years. His name was Bart. And this was his family. Before we get into how a son ends up orchestrating the murder of his own parents, hit subscribe, because this case has 4 separate assassination attempts before anyone pulls a trigger. And you're going to want to see how each one falls apart. Also, drop a comment. Where are you watching from and what time is it there? I like knowing who's in the room for this one. Who is Bart? Bart Whitaker grew up outside Houston, Texas, in what most people would call a good home. His dad ran a successful company. His mom stayed close with both her sons. On paper, the Whitakers looked like the kind of family other people envied. Bart didn't see it that way. By the time he was 20, he'd built up a quiet resentment toward his parents. The pressure to perform, the expectations he felt he could never meet, the sense that he was constantly falling short of some version of himself they wanted. Friends who knew him back then described someone who felt suffocated by his own family's success. And somewhere in that resentment, an idea took root. If his family was gone, all of them, he wouldn't just be free of the pressure, he'd also inherit an estate worth roughly $1.5 million. That was in the year 2000. Bart was 20 years old, and he'd already decided what he wanted to do about it. He just needed someone willing to do it for him. Attempt 1, the roommates. Bart didn't look far for his first recruits. He turned to 2 of his own college roommates and made them an offer that should have ended the conversation immediately. Help me break into my parents' house and kill them. I'll make it worth your while. Somehow, they said yes. The plan was simple enough on paper. Break in through a back window while the family was away. Get inside. Wait. They made it as far as the glass. The second their hands touched the window frame, the house alarm tore through the quiet neighborhood. 2 grown men, who'd agreed to commit a double or triple homicide, turned and ran like teenagers caught egging a house. The alarm had done its job. The first attempt on the Whitaker family's life ended before it even really began. Bart, for his part, wasn't discouraged. He was just getting started. Attempt 2. The friend who got cold feet. A few months later, Bart tried again. This time, he approached a different friend, laid out the same pitch, money in exchange for murder, and again, got an initial yes. But as the conversations continued, something shifted. This friend started to realize Bart wasn't speaking hypothetically. He wasn't venting or joking or blowing off steam about his parents the way college kids sometimes do. He meant it. All of it. And that realization was enough. The friend backed out, quietly, and walked away from the plan entirely. 2 attempts down, 2 failures. Most people would have taken that as a sign. What's the weather like where you're watching from today? Drop it in the comments. I read all of them. Because Bart wasn't done, not even close. Attempt 3, the warning nobody believed. By 2001, word of what Bart had been trying to do had started to travel the way these things do, in a tight social circle. A college acquaintance of his caught wind of the plot, and unlike everyone else who'd heard some version of this story and stayed quiet, she went to the police. Officers took it seriously enough to contact the Whitaker family directly and tell them, "Your son has been trying to hire someone to kill you." And the family's reaction? Disbelief. It sounded insane. Bart was their son. He'd grown up in their house, eaten dinner at their table every night, borrowed the car, asked for money for textbooks. The idea that he was quietly shopping around for a hitman felt like something out of a movie, not their actual lives. So they did what a lot of parents would do. They asked him directly, and Bart lied. He told them it was a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion, nothing to worry about. And his parents, the 2 people who knew him better than anyone, believed their son over a police warning. 2 more years passed. 2 more years of a family living beside a threat they'd been told about and chosen not to see. If you've made it this far, you already know where this is going, and you know a warning wasn't enough to stop it. Hit subscribe now, because the plan that finally worked is the part of this story that's genuinely hard to sit through. Attempt 4, the plan that worked. By 2003, Bart was ready to try again, and this time he found 2 people willing to see it through, a man named Chris Champagne and another named Stephen Brashea. The plan they built together was more sophisticated than anything Bart had tried before. Champagne and Brashea would break into the Whitaker home while the family was out, tear the place apart to make it look like a burglary, and wait. When the family came home, Brashea would shoot them, and it would look, to any responding officer, like a robbery that had gone catastrophically wrong. To make it work, Bart needed to get his family out of the house at the right time, without raising suspicion. So he lied again. This time he told his parents he was about to graduate college. He wasn't. He was on academic probation. He wasn't even enrolled that semester. But his family didn't know that. All they knew was that their son had a milestone worth celebrating, so they offered to take him to dinner. The dinner. While the Whitakers got ready for a celebration dinner, Champagne and Brashea were getting into position. Champagne parked outside as the getaway driver. Brashea slipped into the house through a side door that Bart had made sure was left unlocked. He was supposed to trash the place, pull out drawers, flip furniture, scatter belongings, anything to sell the burglary story. He never did it. He just waited. Meanwhile, across town, the Whitaker family had no idea any of this was happening. They sat down to dinner and celebrated a graduation that was never real. At some point that night, Bart's parents gave him a gift to mark the occasion. A Rolex, worth around $4,000. His family was buying him a watch to celebrate a lie he'd told them, on the same night he'd arranged for them to be murdered when they got home. They had no idea what was waiting for them. We'll get to exactly what happened, but first, if this is your first time on the channel, this is Daily Crime Case, and I cover stories like this every week. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. What happened next? Dinner ended. The Whitakers drove home, still riding the high of the night, still completely unaware. You already saw how it went. The brother walked in first, shot. Their mother followed, shot. Their father, confused by the noise, walked toward it instead of away from it, shot. And then Bart walked through the door, and Brashea shot him too, once through the arm, not fatal, just enough to make him look like a victim instead of the person who'd planned the whole thing. Brashea ran for the getaway car. Champagne drove them both away into the night. Inside the house, Bart called 911. His mother and his brother did not survive. His father did. When police arrived, Bart told them a simple story. A burglar broke in, his family came home at the worst possible moment, and everything that happened was random, senseless, tragic. But the house didn't back up the story. Brashea was supposed to ransack the place to sell the robbery angle, and for whatever reason, he never did. Drawers were shut, furniture untouched, nothing missing. It didn't look like any burglary detectives had ever worked. And Bart himself wasn't behaving like a man whose family had just been gunned down in front of him. Investigators noticed it. They just didn't have anything they could act on yet. A detective working the case got an anonymous call from someone who said they had information, but they wouldn't say it over the phone. They wanted to meet in person. So one night, in a dark parking lot behind the police station, the detective sat down with the source. It was the same friend who 3 years earlier had agreed to help Bart kill his family, and then backed out when he realized Bart was serious. He told the detective everything. The first attempt, the second, the pattern. For the first time, police had a name attached to a motive, and a timeline that stretched back years before the murders. They set up a sting. The friend agreed to let police record a phone call with Bart, hoping to get him to confess. It didn't work. Bart was careful. He never admitted to planning anything. The only thing he gave up was that he knew Champagne and Brashea. Not proof, just a thread. But it was a thread that would eventually unravel everything. Something spooked him. Maybe it was the phone call, maybe it was just paranoia catching up with guilt. Either way, 7 months after the murders, Bart took $7,000 from his father, the same father he'd tried to have killed, and fled across the border into Mexico. There, he built an entirely new life. New name, Rudy Rios. New apartment. A job at a local furniture store. Even a girlfriend who had no idea who he really was or what he'd done. Back in Texas, police brought Champagne in for questioning. He cracked almost immediately, admitting he'd been the getaway driver, that Brashea was the shooter, and most importantly, that the entire plan had come from Bart. Champagne was arrested. Brashea was arrested shortly after, but Bart was gone. No name, no trail, no idea where in Mexico he might be. For a while, it genuinely looked like he might just disappear into his new life and stay there. It didn't last. The same person who'd helped Bart cross the border into Mexico eventually turned him in, reportedly hoping for reward money. Rudy Rios, furniture salesman, was arrested and identified as Bart Whitaker, a man wanted in Texas for orchestrating the murder of his own mother and brother. In the end, all three men were held responsible. Chris Champagne, the getaway driver, received 15 years. Stephen Brashea, the shooter, was sentenced to life in prison. And Bart Whitaker, the son who spent 3 years and 4 separate attempts trying to have his own family killed for an inheritance, also received a life sentence. His father survived, which means the man who tried 4 times to have his family murdered has to live with the fact that the parent he tried hardest to kill is the one still alive to know exactly what he did. If you're still here, I want to know, if you were his parents and police showed up at your door telling you your son had tried to hire a hitman, would you have believed it, or would you have done exactly what they did? Let me know in the comments. And if this case got under your skin the way it got under mine, subscribe for next week's story. I'll see you then.